What up, everybody? It's your boy Ron James, the Best Damn Media, here with my guy Chris Drew of Menace to Sports, here for another Bleacher Report live stream. Chris, how you doing?
Living the dream. Excited to bring in even more Buckeye content. You know, it's funny, we got the bye week out of the way, and now it's just all Buckeyes for the rest of the fall, right?
Absolutely. We got our rest, our much needed rest. I feel like we've been going 100 miles an hour since camp started for the Buckeyes. So got some much needed rest during the bye week, but we're right back to it talking. Is Ohio State on upset alert this week, Chris? I got
That's the
the
million dollar
poll in the
question.
chat.
$1 million question.
Let us know in the chat if the Buckeyes are on upset alert. But I just want to jump right into this matchup, man. We got some interesting things that I want to talk about regarding Maryland and Ohio State, but something a little bit outside of the game that I want to touch on that's been a popular topic for us and for Maryland. New OCs for both teams. Brian Hartline in the offseason recently named and promoted offensive coordinator at Ohio State, and our buddy, good longtime friend, Josh Gaddis, named the offensive coordinator at Maryland. I just wanted to get your thoughts on both of these teams dealing with a new offensive coordinator this season, and neither one of them are calling plays. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, having two offensive coordinators right now, former position coaches, both former wide receiver coaches, but the play calling duties live with the head coach right now. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, honestly, it's hilarious because usually when you see the OC job title, it means you're calling plays. Two guys that both took different roads but have similar backgrounds. Obviously, you know, Josh Gaddis, a wide receiver guy. He coached wide receivers at Penn State. He coached wide receivers at Bama, which was a crazy loaded room, and he's able to parlay that success in an OC job at Michigan. For those who don't know, went to Michigan, was calling plays at first, and then that's where we had the invention of speed and space. And while he was there, him and Mike Loxley actually beefed about who called the plays at Bama because they were both there together. Then obviously we saw that Josh Gaddis got play calling duties revoked from Michigan, was still a good part of that Michigan staff that beat Ohio State. Then ended up going to Miami, and that's kind of where the Josh Gaddis experience hit an all-time high with very, very bad offenses, and we've kind of talked about them at great length. And then now the guy who he was beefing with is the only one left that wants to hire you and bring you on, joins Mike Loxley, and Mike Loxley lets you call plays in the spring. You do a bad job. He gets up on not national television, but television and says, this offense is like watching paint dry. And as soon as he said those three words, it's like, oh, yeah, you know what time it is. Mike Loxley's going to call the plays. Similarly to Ohio State, Brian Hartline has been kind of the prodigy in terms of being a wide receiver coach and a recruiter. We know Marv, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Emeka, like the list goes on and on. He's building a really impressive resume early. But again, he got a chance to call the plays in the spring. Ryan Day, coming off his best play calling game ever, and I'll say that against Georgia, looks at this and was like, nah, I'll call the plays. So both OCs, even though in the job description it is call plays, both of them are hanging out and suggesting plays on game day.
So I want to stick on the topic of offensive coordinators. Our guy Buckeye Stuff, Terry, shout out to you in the chat, says, does Loxley put Jim Knowles in a blender again this season? And I know that's a little bit later in our notes, but I did want to see that I did see that in the chat and wanted to see if you wanted to touch on that real quick before we get to it.
Yeah, I'll touch on it real briefly. I mean, honestly, bro, I am concerned about Jim Knowles because, again, Blitzaholics Anonymous has been doing his job, but at some point you're going to see when Maryland goes four wide, a guy like Jim Knowles get the itch to bring the blitz. And so that's going to be a chess match that's happening, but I'm worried this year way less than last year for a couple reasons. First of all, I like Iggy a lot. We'll talk about his matchup in a little bit. And then second, we played Maryland at the end of the year last year. And so Ohio State already put all their defensive deficiencies on tape, and Mike Loxley's that guy. He's the guy that will grab those and stretch them, and that was kind of the Tanner McAllister game. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, obviously get more kind of heavy into what that means and what that matchup looks like. But again, it's so funny. We have these hot shot OCs, both of them not calling plays in a game that I think could have a unique offensive output.
Absolutely. So Buckeye fans right now are up in arms all over the timeline right now because they're confused at this very topic. Is Ohio State on upset watch? Because they can't seem to understand where the national media is coming from, where the sports books are coming from, where everyone's getting this idea that Ohio State is on upset alert. They see the points that Maryland's able to put up. There's still some doubt with this Ohio State defense, despite them being stout this entire season. But when I thought about it, I kind of had that same sentiment. Like, there's a lot of things stacked against Maryland right now, and I just wanted to run these past you and see where your mind is as far as an upset. Maryland is 0-8 against Ohio State in the last decade. Ohio State is averaging 57.5 points a game in those 8 games against them. To this day, Ryan Day has only lost to one Big Ten opponent, and that's the Michigan Wolverines. It seems right now that all the odds are stacked against Maryland. Ohio State is at home. Ryan Day is coming off a bye week, and you just referenced Ryan Day's best play calling performance of his career was against Georgia, and I don't think it was any coincidence that he was able to have such a great play calling game with the extra time that he had to prepare. So with all of these factors stacked against Maryland, what do you see going into this matchup as how this could potentially be an upset, or do you think these factors alone are just too much for Maryland to overcome and weigh heavily in the Buckeyes' favor in this matchup?
I think there's 2 types of upsets, Ron, and you can correct me if I sound absolutely dumb when I kind of put this together, but part of me feels like the one upset is the quote-unquote disaster upset, and that's where you have like the freak long plays, the trick plays, and a special teams blunder that a team goes through, and they end up losing by 3. And then there's the we're going to outplay you for 4 quarters upset, and that is where you see like the Duke versus Clemson's, where Clemson was heavily favored, but Duke came out and outplayed them for the entire game. For me, I don't think Maryland even has a remote shot if it is I have to outplay Ohio State for 4 quarters. I don't think they're capable of that. But I do think with Mike Loxley, they're capable of like the flash upset, right? Like the 2 big plays there, the special teams play there, the trick play there, that we're going to go for it on 4th down on our own 20-yard line on 4th and 2 because we need to score. That's the kind of upset I think they would need to pull. But the fact of the matter is this: it is at home, and I don't see that happening because I think a lot of times you can get away with that stuff on the road. But at the crib, at Ohio State, I think you need to outplay a team or play a team close for 3 quarters and then explode in the 4th. So with those factors you mentioned, I'm not super concerned. And additionally, I do view this as a Ryan Day grudge match game because we always talk about how Ryan Day is kind of trying to scare off this or chase this narrative away about the toughness. Well, the first person to talk about his program as not being a tough program is none other than Josh Gaddis after the 2021 Michigan game. Josh Gaddis was the one that started this spiral for Ryan Day, that's led Ryan Day to abandon his roots, said, we don't believe in 4 wide anymore. When we want to run the ball for 1 yard, we're going to bring in 17 tight ends and 17 tackles and stack them all up on the line. Like, because of Josh Gaddis' comments, we see Ryan Day popping off and really talking crazy. And additionally, we saw the media take Josh Gaddis' words and Jim Harbaugh's words and use that as the knock against Ryan Day for the last 4 years.
This is absolutely a get-back game for Ryan Day. And while Josh Gaddis has no control over the defense that Ryan Day will be calling against, I think Ryan Day will have an emphasis on running up the score and showing him that his team is not soft. But so you seem to be leaning towards this is going to be a tough hill to climb for Maryland. But I did want to talk about some of the concerns that Maryland may present for OSU. And one of the first things I wanted to ask you about is, do you think the speed from the Maryland wide receivers is enough to test Ohio State? One of the things that a lot of people have talked about is that Maryland's able to out-athlete a lot of teams, but they run into a buzzsaw when they see Ohio State, because not only is Ohio State just as fast, if not faster, they're always stronger and tougher in the trenches. So being able to compete at what Maryland does best, and then also usually out physical them despite the narratives about Ohio State not being a physical team. So do you think that Maryland has the type of athletes to truly test this Ohio State team? Because you painted the picture of a potential upset where it included big plays, and I feel like that requires explosive athletes to be able to have that, like your Rondell Moore type game.
Yeah, I mean, they have some speed on the outside for sure. I mean, we've seen a couple times they run a lot of bubbles. We saw them, house some bubbles, and that's really impressive. Honestly, like Mike Loxley as a wide receiver guy will always get those guys in space. They have a group of receivers that are kind of interchangeable 1 and 2. Similarly, like I like how Marv is, and honestly, like they let Talia go out there and create, and when Talia goes out there and creates, that worries me the most. Right now, I think schematically, I like where Ohio State is in terms of matching up with the Maryland receivers. I do think that Iggy is the perfect corner for some of these guys, and also like teams avoid Denzel Burke like crazy. But the concern for me is if our pass rush isn't able to get home, are they going to be able to cover guys for an extra 2 seconds when Talia decides to create? And I think that's the concern. Honestly, that was the concern last year. They were able to get loose and get some space. But no, they got some speed and skill on the outside, and that's something that Maryland will have consistently. And so, as I'm take close eye on this thing, that's definitely one of the areas.
So you kind of touched on my next question. Can OSU's pass rush make Talia uncomfortable? Because we've been asking every week, where are the sacks from this defensive line? And it seems like every week we come away wanting to be critical because of the low sack numbers, and then we go back and watch the tape and say, well, these guys are doing their job. They are getting it done for the most part in the run game. They are getting the pressures. We are seeing them make quarterbacks uncomfortable. We saw in the Western Kentucky game, they were able to force the turnovers. Overall, they were able to keep Sam Hartman in check. Do you think, is that just something that Ohio State fans need to give up? Like, we're not going to see the Chase Young style sack numbers. We don't have a double-digit sack guy. It seems that 4 or 5 games into the season, like, Ohio State does not have a double-digit sack guy on this roster. But do you think they'll be able to create enough pressure, even if they're not getting home, to cause problems for him?
I think they'll create pressure. I am concerned about the finishing pressure because earlier this year, like the quarterbacks we've played have not always been super mobile guys. Like I think Sam Hartman's a really good quarterback, but when you force pressure on Sam Hartman, what's it going to do? Get rid of the ball. Talia is more of a creator, right? Forcing pressure isn't enough. You have to force pressure and get him to the ground. And I think this will be kind of the game that emphasizes that. And honestly, like I know it's not the big three, and we did a show last week about the Big Ten's big three, but this is the fourth. Like this is the Big Three's little brother. Like this is an undefeated Big Ten team with probably a top 3 quarterback in the conference if you want to keep it a beam. So I mean,
Michigan State fans have to be sick right now.
Oh, got to be tight.
Like gotta be tight. Michigan calls them little brother, and we're like, we're disowning you. You're not even little brother anymore. We adopted Maryland. Like, we don't even respect Michigan State enough. Like, we had this nickname for Michigan State, Michigan fans do, of little brother, which is quite possibly one of the most disrespectful nicknames in a rivalry.
Comedy, bro. When someone calls you little bro, we have to squabble. Like, something has to happen.
So they have this nickname, and they've been relegated to, you're not even little brother anymore. We adopted a new brother. Shout out Mike Loxley and the Terps. It feels like Maryland is here to assert themselves as number 4 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they have asserted themselves. Now, in terms of the run game, Ron, stop me if I'm jumping the gun. I do think that Ohio State can make this Maryland team one-dimensional. I think they're so good up the middle. I think Tyleik Williams asserted himself as, to me, at least a top 5 defensive tackle in all of college football. I think if they can shut down Hemby, who I do like and do think is a good running back, I think if they put the game on Talia's hands, we will learn a ton about this Ohio State secondary. Because right now, I feel like we know enough about the D-line, like not sack experts, but they generate pressures. But what do we know about truly the back end being tested constantly? And I think this might be the game we learn that.
Will they make us force them to do that? Or do you think they're going to come out and just try to sling it from the start? Like, do you think Ohio State is going to have to make them one-dimensional? Or do you think they're going to come out here and just be one-dimensional? Because they really haven't shown much of a desire to run the ball this year. So do you think Ohio State's going to have to even stop the run, or do you think they're going to just dive straight into this passing attack?
I mean, I think they're going to have to shut down the run. I mean, Hemby this year has 20 more carries than Trayvon Henderson. I do know that obviously they have the extra game, but I do know that they do like to keep at least a certain level of balance because Mike Loxley does like doing the play action stuff, and also they use kind of their screen game as an extension of the run. So I think they want to run the ball a little bit, but if Mike Loxley comes out here and just abandons the run game from the rip, I think it's going to be a long day for somebody. I mean, like, obviously we've talked about the Ohio State sack numbers haven't been there, but if you want to drop back 40 times, JTT or Jack Sawyer is going to get home. Or we've seen the secondary hasn't got enough credit this year, but the ball disruption in the secondary has been there. Like the interceptions have been there, the pick sixes have been there, and just additionally getting their hands on the football has been there. So I'm not sure it's a great recipe for them to abandon off the rip. I do expect, though, them to maybe open up and test the jaw of Igbinosun early, just play action, deep shot, just to see or let Ohio State know, hey, we're here, wake up. We are part of the Big Four.
You can't even say that with a straight face. Oh, man. Earlier you brought up the run game from the Maryland perspective, but I want to ask you about Ohio State's run game. Do you think that this offensive line, we've seen them have struggles with alignment issues throughout the year. We've seen them have troubles with penalties. Do you think this run game is able to get their stuff together this game, and we're able to see Ohio State get pushed from the offensive line and be able to run the ball? Because I've been curious with games like this, will you see Ohio State revert back to what we saw earlier in the season? And we've never seen a Ryan Day offense really do this in the past, but with Kyle McCord being not as dynamic as some of the previous quarterbacks at Ohio State, could we see Ryan Day try to take the air out of the ball? And if they're getting stops in the pass game, do they slow this down and try to really control the clock and put this game away with the run game early and milk some clock and maybe have a 14-point lead, a 20-point lead going into half, and really just try to take the air out of the ball the rest of the game?
It's my ball and I'm going home, right? That's the saying. It's funny, Ron. I think they're capable of doing that. I would like to see, though, Ohio State. And my issue with the short yardage stuff, Ron, and some of the times they get stuffed, is I think that Ryan Day signals to the world, hey, we're going to run it, so put out a run-stopping package, because they'll take the receivers out. They'll put in like Montgomery, and it's like everyone knows they're going to run.
Caden Curry in. We put our third-string defensive end in that fullback.
That's what I'm saying. Like for Ryan Day, great. You want to prove you're tough? Great. Josh Gattis has some comments, but how about this? How about we leave 3 receivers out there, maybe a 4th one, and run it with them out there? Because that's when Ohio State's had some success. Ohio State, the long run against Notre Dame, who was out there? Marvin the guys. And it's a cat and mouse game. I missed the cat and mouse Ryan Day. When Ryan Day was running the ball against Notre Dame last year, it was, we have our receivers out here. We're going to keep running the ball. And the second you try to bring somebody else in, we're going to take a shot and test your jaw. I miss that version, because right now, some of the yardage stuff has been because, okay, we're going to go super big. We're going to tell the opposing DC, hey, we're running the ball, either the A gap or the B gap. Good luck. And we're surprised that they keep stopping it. Now, I hope that they do that, Ron, because I don't want to be in a shootout yet. I don't feel comfortable with the shootout. And additionally, we're not super sure about the health of Marvin Harrison Jr. either.
So you brought up a word that we have in the notes a million times. And I asked the question, how do these teams want to win? Mm-hmm. And you said a shootout. Does the shootout benefit Maryland more than it benefits Ohio State with what we've seen from the Ohio State offense so far this season?
I do think it benefits Maryland. I think Maryland probably wants us to be a shootout. If you're Ohio State, you don't want a shootout, because if you have a shootout, that means you're having PTSD about the defense. And that's not something that any Ohio State fans are ready for, because right now, Ohio State fans are coping with the fact that, okay, like, listen, we don't have a great offense. That's good, because our defense, real good. But if we have to get in a shootout, it's like, Shrekky, we're supposed to have the good defense. And now it's like it's kind of up in the air. But a shootout favors Maryland. I don't think Ohio State wants a shootout, but I'm not saying Ohio State can't win a shootout, because I think if we do get in a shootout, Ryan Day will loosen up. And the loose Ryan Day that's in a shootout, we don't lose those games unless the kicker forgets how to kick. So
who do you think needs to loosen up more for the Ohio State offense to be successful? Do you think it's more about Ryan Day calling the game within himself, or Kyle McCord taking a step and believing in himself?
Well, I think it would help if Ryan Day would trust Kyle. And now, after the Notre Dame game, the high drama game of the year 2 weeks ago, I would hope that's enough to trust Kyle McCord. Because let's face it, like, Dad was at work, the house was on fire, nobody was there to put it out, and Kyle McCord put out the fire and saved the house. So now you got to trust him.
So you think Ryan Day may trust Kyle McCord now, but the question is, does Chris Drew trust Kyle McCord? If this were to be a shootout and someone told you Saturday morning, the Buckeyes only win this game if Kyle McCord is able to hang 45 on the Maryland defense. We talked earlier in the show and said Ohio State in the last decade is averaging 57.5 points against the Terps. If 45 is required to win on Saturday, do you, Chris Drew, trust Kyle McCord to be able to hang 45?
See, Robbie set me up, chat. Robbie set me up because he knows that I have a ridiculous bias in the favor of Devin Brown in terms of just like in a vacuum what a quarterback can do. But this game in particular, if we had to score 45, I think we could with Kyle. I really do. The Maryland defense doesn't really frighten me as much. And I think that on 2 weeks, as long as Marvin Harrison Jr. there, I think with 2 weeks prep and the grudge match that I think that Ryan Day is going to embark on, I do think Kyle can score the 45.
A question for you about Kyle McCord. I'm sorry that we have to continue to go down this path. I feel like we're all waiting on that breakout moment from Kyle McCord where we're like, wow, this is why Ryan Day gets paid the big bucks. Look what he's able to do with every quarterback. We see the best game out of Kyle McCord we could possibly see this season. What pro player would you compare his game to? So we get the best Kyle game we possibly could get. Who does that look like in the NFL? Because the name that I'm going to throw out, and I feel like the Kyle McCord experience is probably similar to people that are fans of teams this guy has played for. Kyle McCord has Kirk Cousins vibes to me.
Oh, the V was for the Vikings. That's literally what I was throwing out.
Because Kirk is one of those guys where it's like, I've seen this guy do it before. Like, he can make every throw, but then sometimes he just gets comfortable. Like, I'm just going to dink and dunk. I don't care. I got a great wide receiver streaking down there, not throwing it to him. Like, I'm just going to check down Charlie this whole game and then look at you in the press conference and tell you I tried hard. And, like, I'm going to come back next week and probably put up 6 touchdowns. And I feel like that's going to be the Kyle McCord experience. Like, I feel like sometimes it's like, dude, I've seen you do this. Please do it.
It's like dealing with a little kid. Like, bro, like, please, bro, like, please just do what we've seen you do. I know you can go be good at school. I know you can.
Like, bro, I've seen you tie your shoes before. Like, I don't need to walk to the other side of the park to help you, bro. If you don't tie your shoes and run over here, like, we gotta go.
No, it's gonna be very Kirk Cousins-y for the year this year. And I'm hoping that we get the explosion, because the one thing about Kirk Cousins is he'll have those games and Justin Jefferson will be upset and Stephon Diggs will be upset and Adam Thielen will be upset and they'll all push their way out. But then you look back and it's like, dang, Kirk Cousins thrown for 4K each of the last 5 years. So, that's what it looks like. That's what you hope for. Like, I'm hoping for it. I'm hoping to see a Kyle explosion. I'm hoping that the week off and the grudge match and all of that allows kind of Ryan Day to go crazy. And also, like, I think it'd be good for the defense to see the offense go crazy. Because the last thing you want is because I was feeling that Notre Dame game is like, dang, this defense knows they're not scoring on offense. That's got to be so stressful.
Absolutely.
So I don't know.
So before we get out of here, you did a Maryland deep dive crash course for this episode. So I want you to let me know, what are the key matchups that we need to be looking for this week that you think will determine this game? We've talked about all of the outside aspects affecting this game. We've talked a little bit about what we've seen from these teams so far this year. But let's get into these individual matchups and what should the people be looking for to really decide this game this week?
That left tackle, best name in college football, Delmar Glaze, has not allowed a sack the entire season. He's up against JT and Jack Sawyer. And look, this is going to be a team that's going to drop back a good amount. So, Mr. Glaze, we need it. Like, we got to see it. And I'm ready for the Ohio State defensive ends to finally get a win and get a sack. They couldn't do it against Joe Alt. Let's see if they can, force Mr. Glaze into his first sack of the year. That's the first matchup I'll be looking at.
Mr. Glaze is crazy. I know you already ordered that jersey. Our guy Q in the chat, he's also a closet Maryland fan. We already know he has a Mr. Glaze jersey. So shout out to our guy Q Peasky in the chat right now. Both Maryland corners allowing a catch under 50% of targets versus EE and Marv. Thoughts there?
Yeah, well, that's big time. I mean, that means that those corners are doing at least a good job at times. I mean, anytime you hold somebody under 50% in today's college football quick game, that is a plus. And, you'd like to think there is going to be some ball disruption there. The best thing for Kyle McCord is for EE to get open. Emeka has to get open and has to hold on to the football, too. I want to see no drops from Emeka this week. That's definitely a key matchup that I'll be keeping a close eye on.
So Cam kind of rebuffed this suggestion by me last week when I said, I think Emeka establishing himself as a dominant slot threat is imperative for this offense to take the next step, and I think it'll open up things for Marv. And his response was like, or Marv could just get open. And he's like, and he needs to hit Marv when he's open. And I just feel like while that is true, I feel like this offense is so predicated on having a dominant slot threat that can be dynamic when they get the ball, because I feel like that's something that people forget, because the checkdowns looked different with Dwayne. Because you would see KJ and Paris Campbell then streak for 30, 40, 70 yards. So, I feel like we're missing some of that explosion and some of the short passing game, opening up things for our offense. So I just wanted to get your thoughts there. How crucial do you think it is that Emeka really establishes himself in this offense for the Buckeyes to have continued success going forward?
To me, this is like the chicken or the egg conversation, because I don't know if the slot was so open because of the stuff that was going on outside, or if the outside stuff was open because of stuff going on in the slot. I think the slot opens up the outside. So if you have to get more eyes on Emeka, if that safety has to constantly be concerned about Emeka catching something and going, I think that would be big to help out Marv. But additionally, Cam's right. Marv's supposed to be the best in America. We shouldn't have to scheme Marv open. He should go get open, and teams should scheme to have him covered. We've seen this year a lot less double teams on Marv, and I think that's why Emeka had such a big game, honestly, against Notre Dame, because he wasn't effective in the slot. So it's going to be him versus Still and Shepard this week. Those are the two names to look out for if you are kind of paying attention to the to the Maryland DBs. But I need a slot fade, and also additionally, something that I wish we would see is in that Utah game 2 years ago, we saw Marv in the slot too. If this offense is so predicated on slot work, why not just show a look a couple times of Marv in the slot,
Marv in the slot, Emeka at the Z, Carnell at X. I'm just saying. But there's a couple other matchups that I wanted to hit on before we get out of here. Our guy Terry asked about this earlier in the show, and we knew that we'd be getting to it towards the end of the show. Jim Knowles versus Mike Loxley. That was a heck of a matchup last year. Do you think that Jim Knowles has learned something from this lesson, or do you think Mike Loxley learned something about Jim Knowles last year?
I think Mike Loxley got very fortunate last year that game was so late in the year. So by that point, Penn State had already put on tape that Ohio State couldn't defend slot receivers, and they worked that and they used that. So they used that a lot in the Maryland game, and that's kind of what started the slide of what ended up being kind of the pass defense late in the season. This year, Ohio State has not shown that. The one thing that Ohio State has shown they're susceptible to is throw at Iggy a lot. And for me, Iggy had the most targets last week against Notre Dame. For me, I'll take that, because I think Iggy's a far better corner than Cam Brown and Tanner McAllister. And I think if you want to live and die by Iggy's performance, chances are you're going to die out there.
And I feel like picking on Iggy is playing with fire, because go ahead, pick on Iggy. You don't want his replacement coming in the game, because I promise you, you're not getting any help
Sticky.
If the boy from Cincinnati comes in the game and the boy Jermaine Matthews gets playing time, because I promise you, that is not what any team wants. So go ahead, play Iggy off the field. You're going to have a 5-star corner coming in there, and I promise you, it's going to be problems. Jermaine Matthews is going to be elite. And playing the person ahead of him on the depth chart off the field is a dangerous game. And we talked about Iggy. Ty Felton, Maryland's number 2 wide receiver, led them in receiving yards last week. What do you think about that matchup? Because in our notes, you have that as being the biggest matchup to watch because you think that's where they plan on attacking the Buckeyes the most. So a little background on Ty Felton and what you think this matchup is going to look like this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the place they have to attack. Now Felton is 6'2", 185, so he's a bigger guy. And so that's going to be a really, really physical matchup. And he went for over 100 last week, and he kind of became like the big body favorite target for Talia. So for me, at least, if you like physical corner play and physical wide receiver play, those are the two. You're going to get your flags on both of them probably. But that's going to be who I think they try to pick on because we've seen it. Denzel Burke has been sticky and he's been hitting and no one wants to even test him. So I think that they're going to kind of rely on Felton a little bit there and try to take advantage of sometimes the hand discipline being off by Iggy. So that's the big matchup I have circled just because I think that will be a battle. And Iggy, for as good as I think he's been, he hasn't exactly been the most natural and fluid in coverage and it's really lean on his size, but he's been bigger than every receiver. This will be the first receiver that's bigger than him that he's played this year.
So we are almost at our time here. I don't normally like to give out score predictions this early in the week, but Bleacher Report is special and we do it for them. Is Ohio State on upset alert? And if so, or if not, what is your score prediction going into the week? This is our official Maryland preview for Ohio State here on Bleacher Report, so we got to get the score predictions out before we get out of here. Chris, are we on upset alert, and what's your score prediction?
I think they're on upset notice, like notice. If you don't pay the rent, the eviction notice will come, but you still have some time to pay the rent. I have the score being 36-17 in favor of Ohio State. I think they end up being too much.
Boo, I thought I was going to be all creative with my 35-point pick for the Buckeye score, and then here goes Chris Drew like we're on The Price is Right. I'll go 1 point higher. I got 35-24. I think Maryland scores the most points that we see all year against the Buckeyes this year. I think we see Maryland score the most points against the Buckeyes this year. So I'm going with 35-24. Buckeyes. I don't think they're on upset alert, but I do think this defense is going to be challenged in a way that they have yet to see this year. I appreciate you doing this with me today, Chris. Let the people know where they can find you, and we will get out of here.
Yeah, daily on the Menace of Sports Show, and then on Twitter at Christopher Drew. So that's I'm easy to find. Find me with Ron, wherever Ron is. I'm at.
Exactly. We will be back on Bleacher Report 8 more times this month, so make sure that you're subscribed to the Ohio State channel in the team stream. We will be back Thursday. You could find me on Twitter at 2Ts. That's 2_TEES. And on the Best Damn Media YouTube, we're on there 7 days a week, constantly streaming. So we appreciate you guys pulling up and watching this Ohio State Maryland preview. And big shout out to Bleacher Report. Thank you for having us. Go Bucks and OH.
IO.